Strength of America podcast.
All right, welcome back to Strength of America, episode 32. Bob Davis.
Bobby Davis.
Basically, want to talk to you guys. The last one was good. Got some good feedback and things on it. We put down the 7 components of your training program, and then started getting things on what are you getting, what are you not, what are you missing in your program. So now we want to break it into a lot more detail and answer some of the questions that we've been getting. And so the first one we went over was really mobility. And for us, I think that's something that is overlooked a lot of times. And what we mean by that is doesn't mean that you have to, until you have enough flexibility or mobility to do this, you shouldn't do it at all. Like the squats, we still have to gain strength. We still got to get powerful. But those that are limited in certain areas, we need to focus on. But that was a question, well, what areas or what do we need to look for? Or what is the problem of that? So I think we want to take you through a few of the lifts today we're getting questions on, and then show you, okay, well, great. If you're having troubles, what are the solutions to that? What you can do to fix it? So I think one of the first things, because everybody's talking about, is the squat, that we've got to start there and kind of start with it. And I think mobility, what are some of the things that you see with the kids that when they're doing squats, what are you looking for, or where's the problem generally?
Problem generally starts at ankle mobility. So a lot of people have different issues where ankle only bends so far. Once it maxes out there, then we start tipping at the chest and try to get down there by bending over instead of actually sitting through the hips. So
so that's one of the things that again, if they have that back in the old day, and we still see it in high schools, what typically we'll see is if they have a problem with an ankle and they just can't get down there, they slide the weight underneath the heel so it lifts it up so they can still drop down and move. Well, the problem with some of that is then we're not addressing the main problem that we have with the ankle itself. So we work and modify some things. So what I'm going to do is we're going to set up and have Bobby get under the bar here in a second. And we're going to look at what we should have, where we're limited, and talk about some of the different zones and things, and then show you a couple of breakdowns of things going on. So let's get to the squat rack. All right, and part we got Bobby without the shoes on. We can actually see a little bit better bend what's going on with the ankles and things. So before you start hearing about we shouldn't squat with that or not, we do. We actually do sometimes without that. We'll do warm-up with it. There's a whole lot of various and real things that can help them working barefoot. But another time. Let's get mobility. Let's get into a squat rack and see what we want to see and point out some of the issues that we need to fix. So basically, there's a couple of main things you look at when they're going into their squat and see how he's going down. Good. Now, you see an athlete that comes down. If he comes all the way down there into that good squat where he was at and he holds that. Now, if we're real tight in the ankles, what he talks about is we'll see an athlete that ends up dipping or their knees shoot in, butt goes back and they're forward. Now, we're not getting the stress we want. It's now placed really in the back, and you wonder why kids are having problems with backs when they squat and they talk about back pain. So that's one of the biggest things we've got to look at. But the other also is, I'll see sometimes when they go into their squat again, they get down to that point. We'll have one ankle, we're doing fine, and the other ankle gets tight, so we'll start to see a shift. You get a hip that tips to the side, a knee goes forward, a body in. That's the job of our spotters to look for those problems. And if the spotter doesn't know what to do, of course, that's a great time to say, hey, coach, what are we looking at here and what do we need to fix? What are some of the other things you see when they're squatting? Big part.
A lot of other things, especially from females and that, is knees caving in. Knees will kind of knock in, different things like that. They may sit to a squat and they may shift to one side a little bit. I think that's the most common. Usually it's either ankle, a knee, or kind of a little bit of a shift. And I see that once in a while too. The shift, if we see someone shift, something you can do to that is kind of pull them with a band or give them a little bit of band tension around their hip and feed into where they're going. Now they got to think about fighting against it and balancing out a little bit. You can do the same thing for the knee, or throw a mini band on, or you can just simply try to just cue them knees out and see how that goes from first. So
yeah, that's a good point. When you're putting that into it, that doesn't mean, okay, he's squatting 300, you notice he's having some problems, you put a band on him while he's squatting 300 and start yanking him around, but modify and get back. But I can tell you one of the biggest tools that'll help you, because the kids think they're moving just right and everything's perfect. They have no idea what's happening. Take your camera, videotape, and show what's happening. When they see that, that's going to help them better register on what you're talking about and getting that shift into point. But otherwise, like you said, those bands, putting it around, getting them out. So put the bands around the legs and then they squat. They've got resistance with them going out. They'll feel if one side's harder to pull out, they'll feel weakness right away that they're feeling in the hip. So have them find those spots and go into it. So now once you've got that and you see we've got ankle mobility or problems, now what do we need to do to fix it? That's our next spot. We're going to go over to the wall and show you a couple of things that are good to work on that ankle mobility. All right, Bobby, take them.
So now if we see a kid and we're kind of curious and saying, well, maybe an ankle mobility issue, I'm not quite sure. Just place them down on the floor by a rack, by a wall, whatever you got, and just have them place fist lengthwise down here, okay, along with the thumb out, down on the floor to separate them from toes to the rack, toes to the wall, wherever you're at. From there, all you want to do is try to drive your knee to the rack or the wall while keeping your heel down. Okay, a big thing I see is they go forward, heel lifts up, and they think they're going, but again, it's not ankle mobility. So if I'm going through, drive my ankle, drive my heel into the ground, press forward. Okay, if we can do that and get pretty good distance over the toes, we know, okay, it's not an ankle mobility issue. If they go through, they get stuck, knees right above the toes, and they just can't clear that rest of that distance, well, now we got something that we got to work on a little bit. So,
and then they make sure also at 2 point, as he does that, it's great. Make sure that heel doesn't come up. It's got to stay locked in. And then have them do the other foot as well. Because, again, you're going to find where we have some of those kids that can move on, find one side and not. They get that shift. The shift is we've got imbalances. Now we've got to find out where those imbalances are. So then have them just do the same thing with the other ankle. And you're going to be amazed at how many of them go, wow, crap, this one's an inch away, and this one I'm against the wall. Great. Yeah. What should they be doing? Extra work on the tighter side until that evens up. And that's a daily process that they're going to get into.
Yeah, and I've seen common and oftenly through basketball and different sports like that are high in ankle sprains and stuff like that. Generally on that side, they've had a lot of sprains or had a sprain before. They're probably going to have some restrictions from ankle mobility due to that injury. So something that, right off the bat, you can start having some basketball players work on some foot stuff or different mobility things at the ankle.
Next part going into it, and we see so much of our cleans, whether you're doing hang cleans, power cleans, doesn't matter what it is. One of the things that we try and get our kids to think about a little bit more is they've got to have that mobility, flexibility in the shoulders, the strength, and be able to get themselves into position. They get the rack, they're getting up here tight, but if they're here, well, it's not bad if they're doing a 45-pound bar or 85 pounds. But they start getting 300 pounds and try and hold that with their elbows back behind them, you just can't do it. They've got to get that motion. So let's see what Bobby does here. He's clean pulling into it. So this is a good rack position right here. See how far his arms out here? And have your athletes just get into this position and see what's happening. First of all, tightness, lack of flexibility problems going on to him. Most of them can't get the elbows up this high with that bar. But he's going to actually do just a quick little hang clean for you. And let's see where he finishes with that bar. So when he pops that up to the chest in his finish position.
Now we'll see if I knock my camera in my pocket.
Good. So again, he comes up. Now he's racking it. He's centered. He's supported. His core is pulling in tight. That's where we need to be. And I think too many times our athletes get into quick movements. They pop up and bring it right back down. They never finish the position. And again, that's where we run into mobility problems. This is an easy thing to do. Them just getting a rack and pulling it. But holding it or having a hard time, if he just gets in the rack and steps into it without even taking it off that rack and roll it in, pop him in and show him what happened. So he gets in here. Just that rock, that position into here to get him up, getting his chest pulled up, really popping those elbows up high to force him into that position. And we'll do 30 seconds or longer on that stretch to pull into it. Ease back and pull in. And then again, getting them back in here. Then start loading plates and see if they can keep it. Or as they load plates, so they start dropping it back down. That's part of strength and imbalance as well. So that's one of the key things that will limit their progression on lifts if they don't have the mobility and can't handle it. And yes, the mobility for us, yes, they can perform better if they're mobile, they can do things, but a bigger part for us is really we cut down on the injuries quite a bit. If they're mobile, they can move. So next part we want to take a look at for you guys is your jump landing and what's happening so much. And so next part, we'll see how Bobby's jumping today. We'll back up the camera and get ready.
Okay, so next up, we're going to go into a little bit of movement. I think when we talked about the squats earlier, throwing the plate into the heel, some different things like that, it may be great for the weight room and for that situation, but we got to think, are we helping them for their field court, whatever they're doing, whatever their sport they're doing? And if we have to help with some mobility restrictions by sliding the plate, but we're not actually fixing the cause root of the problem, then we got to keep in mind when they're going to a sport, when they're cutting, running, jumping, landing, doing some quick dynamic things, if that ankle can't load to give them something back, then they're going to start to have some injuries or some irritations. So we're going to go into a depth drop jump. So a big one I like to do, we do this as a start off, just a basic drop, just for landing mechanics, checking for knees, checking for different things, see how they're body's situated when they're absorbing force. Outside of that, the depth drop jump is I'm going to drop down, and then I'm going to jump and punch up as high as I can, and then stick. Now, a lot of athletes, when they go through, if they have ankle mobility issues, different things like that, when they land down, that heel will rise up, knees will rock forward. And that's a big thing right there, right off the bat. If my ankle can't bend, can't load like a spring along with my legs to help drive me up, now when I land down, all that pressure is going up into my knees, down into my foot, driving forward. Now I can't create any power, and I'm causing a lot of wear and tear over time.
Yeah, so that kind of tails in. We're going to give you that was a sneak preview, a little bit of the next one, which is our next episode is going to be really about movement, how these things tie in. But that's why this mobility is so important, because if they're not mobile, we've got those athletes. And again, I worry less about my, 100-pound athletes that haven't done much, they're not that strong going into their sports. The less chance of them getting hurt unless they're playing football with these 200-pound guys. But just as an athlete themselves, what they're going to do damage to their own body isn't much. Now, again, you take that lineman, that 250-pound lineman, have them come up on this, and you're thinking no big deal. It's a 6-inch box. But they come off, and they have no mobility in their ankles. They're powerful. They squat 450. They're strong athletes, but they're not pliable at all. Now they come off of that punch. What's going to happen? That's when you see Achilles rupture, the knees go out, ACLs happen. So there's a lot of that movement part that we're going to break down a lot more for you the next time. So basic thing I want you to take out of this more than anything is we've got to spend some time on mobility. But again, like we talked about last, it doesn't mean we have to, let's sit against the wall, let's check hamstrings, let's do that. If you have time, if you have a staff that can help and do all of that, that's awesome. Because again, we started and we've got smaller numbers, that's great, because we do. We check all of our athletes on our flexibility, how mobile they are, where rotation is, left to right, quad to hamstring ratio, all of that, chest, back, flexibility, shoulders, because we need to know that. Our baseball players or football, depending on the sport, we've got key areas we've got to focus on. But I can tell you, getting back into all this other stuff, most will focus on their squats and their cleans. We've got to get that. But if we never focus on mobility and things, we just keep building strength and power without doing that, our injury factor is going to go through the roof. And that's what we want to fix on our programs that we help and we do coaches clinics and things so much, because there's only so many athletes we get to. And this helps us a lot. However, the coaches, the more we get involved, start taking a look at modifying these things, or parents, hey, is there another thing you ask, for the coaches and help? And they don't mind. Again, if they're doing a good program, they want to make sure you understand what they're doing and getting involved. But if there's things that you can do help or asking about it, you need to, because your goal as a parent is protecting your kids. You've got to make sure that they're safe. So that's where the tools and things we can add into it. We want to go. Any more on the actual where we're at for mobility?
No, I think a lot of that's great, and just cover some simple things. As we're going through, I think we talked about ankle mobility and kind of shoulder, T-spine, stuff like that, mobility. And next big one's hip, and some of that goes on. But we're going to go ahead, and as the week goes on, we'll be sharing and linking some different clips of some different mobility type exercises. That way you guys have an idea, maybe a few we'll go through for the ankle, some different things that you can do for stretching, different things like that, mobility purposes, and then the hip, and then we'll work up the chains. That way you guys have an idea now that we're talking about some of these things, how you go about actually fixing it. So
yeah, that's perfect. So make sure you guys are already, if you're not already on it, tag a friend, share it, subscribe to the channel. If you're on the YouTube, give us a 5-star rating. We appreciate it. It helps get the word out about what's going on. Anything you want to see, tips, questions on this section, mobility, things they're doing in school, not doing in school, things that they can help. What are suggestions on this? My child has a problem with the right shoulder or left, and here's a sport. Great. Let us know. We're glad to help put that out. Plus, we do a lot of special individual video stuff like that to put. So we're glad to do that. But again, spread the word. Let people know what's going on. Make sure, number one, are you guys covering mobility? Look for the next week's episode. Again, if you're subscribed and hit the bell, you get notification. But it's on movement, and that's the big part we look at. You got to be mobile, but how are you moving side to side? And they're doing some great ones. I know I got ripped over there with over Bobby Smith out there doing some stuff. He's doing some great things, and he had just some great ones on the brakes, how we change direction, how we stop. Too many times we don't focus a lot on how we stop. We don't work on the brakes, which is why we see so many ACL problems. And we've got to get the mechanics of what we're doing. So we're going to tag onto that a little bit with our next set, which is movement. So watch that and let us know how we can help. We're going to see you next week.
See you next week.
Thanks.